Maria clutched the strap of her worn-out handbag as she walked into the towering glass building. The lobby floor gleamed so brightly that she could see her own reflection, but she hardly recognized the exhausted young woman staring back at her. Her shoes were scuffed, her blouse slightly faded, but she had done her best to look professional. This was her chance, the job that could save her family. At home, her mother's medicines were running out. Her two younger brothers hadn't eaten a proper meal in days. If she didn't land this job, there would be no rent, no food, and no hope. She whispered under her breath, "Please, God, let them hire me." The company was one of the largest in the city, a place where fortunes were made and futures were destroyed with a single decision. Employees hurried around in sleek suits, heels clicking against marble. Maria felt small, almost invisible, as she was led to the office of the man who ruled this empire. Victor Harrington. The name alone carried weight. He was a billionaire, a man whose ambition was legendary. But so were the whispers, rumors of his cruelty, his arrogance, and the way he treated women in his company. When Maria stepped into his office, she felt the air change. Victor sat behind a mahogany desk, his sharp eyes scanning her resume without looking up. Finally, his gaze landed on her, lingering longer than it should. "You studied accounting?" he asked in a smooth but cold tone. "Yes, sir," Maria replied nervously, "top of my class." "And why do you want this job?" Maria swallowed hard. "Because I need it, sir. I won't let you down. I'll work harder than anyone." Victor smirked. He liked desperation. It gave him control. After a tense silence, he leaned back in his chair. "You'll start tomorrow. Low pay, long hours, no complaints." Relief flooded Maria's chest. She wanted to cry, but she managed a shaky smile. "Thank you, sir. Thank you so much." She walked out of his office with trembling hands but a hopeful heart. She had secured the job. Her family would eat tonight. Little did she know, Victor hadn't just hired an assistant. He had chosen his next victim. On her first day, Maria worked tirelessly. She typed reports, sorted files, even fetched coffee. By evening, her legs ached, but she didn't mind. Every dollar she earned meant survival. But as she placed a file on Victor's desk, she felt his eyes burning into her. His gaze wasn't professional. It wasn't respectful. It was something else, something dangerous. Maria froze, unsure how to react. Victor's lips curled into a smile. "You're not like the others," he said softly. "You're interesting." Maria forced a polite nod and excused herself quickly, her heart pounding. Later, as she rode the elevator down, a woman in her 30s whispered to her, "You're new here, right?" Maria nodded. The woman leaned closer, her voice urgent. "Stay away from Victor. Don't be alone with him, you hear me?" Before Maria could reply, the woman stepped out, disappearing into the crowd. Maria was left shaken. She didn't understand what she had just walked into, but she would soon. That night, Maria returned home with groceries and medicine. Her brothers hugged her, her mother's tired eyes filled with gratitude. Maria thought to herself, "I'll endure anything for them, anything." But she didn't know how true those words would become. Because while she saw this job as salvation, Victor saw it as his next game. Maria finally has the job that could save her family, but at what cost? If you believe her life is about to change forever, hit subscribe. Maria arrived early every morning, determined to prove her worth. She filed documents, arranged schedules, and worked through lunch breaks. To her, every task was a lifeline for her family. But the longer she stayed, the more she realized something was wrong. Victor Harrington wasn't just a demanding boss. He was a predator. It started small. Compliments that sounded more like inspections. "You have a nice smile, Maria. Don't hide it." "That blouse looks good on you. Wear it more often." Maria forced polite nods, telling herself it was harmless. After all, he hadn't crossed a line yet. But then came the late-night calls to his office. One evening, when the office was nearly empty, His voice echoed through the intercom. "Maria, come in here." Her heart thudded as she entered. He leaned back in his chair, whiskey glass in hand. "Sit down," he said, pointing to the chair across from him. Maria hesitated but obeyed. "You know," Victor said, sipping his drink, "you're different from the others. Most women throw themselves at me for a promotion. You resist." Maria swallowed hard. "I'm here to work, sir, nothing else." Victor chuckled. "We'll see about that." The next day, Maria noticed people staring. Conversations stopped when she walked by. She overheard two women whispering near the break room. "Poor thing, he's chosen her now. She won't last long, none of them do." Maria's stomach knotted. Was this what the woman in the elevator had meant? That night, Victor summoned her again. This time, his tone was sharp. "I expect loyalty, Maria, total loyalty." I am loyal," she stammered. He leaned forward, eyes glinting. "Good, because I don't keep employees who refuse me. One word from me and you'll be out on the streets. Your family will starve. Do you understand?" Maria's blood ran cold. He wasn't talking about work anymore. He was talking about her. She wanted to run, to scream, but the image of her sick mother and hungry brothers flashed in her mind. Victor smirked, watching the fear in her eyes. "Think about it," he whispered. "Tomorrow night, my office, don't disappoint me." Maria barely slept. Her hands shook as she cooked breakfast for her brothers. She plastered on a smile, but inside she was crumbling. How could she fight him? If she refused, she'd lose everything. If she obeyed, she'd lose herself. That night, with tears in her eyes and dread in her heart, Maria walked back into Victor's office. He was waiting, confident, certain she wouldn't dare resist. Maria stood frozen at the door. "This isn't right," she whispered. Victor's smile widened. "Right or wrong doesn't matter, Maria. Survival does, and I own your survival." Her knees buckled, but she forced herself to stand. The shame, the fear, the disgust, it was all too much. And then she gave in. When it was over, Maria stumbled out of the office, her soul feeling crushed. In the elevator mirror, she saw herself. Eyes red, face pale, dignity shattered. She wanted to scream, to tear the walls down, to run and never return. But she couldn't. She had a family depending on her. And so she walked home in silence, carrying a burden no one could see. At night, as her family slept peacefully with full stomachs, Maria lay awake, staring at the ceiling. She whispered into the darkness, someday I will make him pay for this." But for now, she had no choice. She was trapped. Maria gave in to survive, but deep inside, a fire of revenge has begun. Do you think she'll stay silent forever? Maria returned home that night, her body aching and her spirit crushed. She could hear her mother coughing softly from the bedroom and her brothers murmuring in sleep. She swallowed her sobs, forced a smile, and set the groceries down. To the outside world, she was still the dutiful daughter, the hardworking sister. No one knew the storm raging inside her. Days turned into weeks, and the abuse continued in subtle, horrifying ways. Victor would summon her to his office under the guise of urgent work, watching her every movement, making her nervous with his smoldering gaze. Maria grew numb. She learned to move like a shadow, to speak little, to blend into the background. Her colleagues whispered about her, yet no one dared help. Office gossip had become a knife. Everyone avoided her as though proximity to her could taint them. But in the quiet moments, alone in her tiny apartment, Maria's rage would surface. She cried silently, sometimes for hours, clutching a pillow and shaking with the weight of her shame. One night, exhausted and defeated, Maria opened an old textbook she had hidden under her bed. Numbers and formulas blurred through her tears. "I can't be trapped like this forever," she thought. She began studying in secret late nights filled with accounting lessons, business strategies, and legal studies. Every hour of learning was a step toward freedom, a small act of rebellion against Victor's control. It was dangerous. If anyone discovered she was doing anything outside his shadow, it could cost her everything. Yet for the first time in months, Maria felt a spark, a tiny ember of hope. Her family remained unaware of the abuse. They saw only a diligent, overworked daughter. Maria couldn't tell them, not only for their safety, but because the shame weighed too heavily on her. She began keeping a journal, pouring her pain into words she would never show anyone. Each entry reminded her she was not powerless forever. Victor's face haunted her dreams, but so did visions of her own future. A future where she held power, where no one could humiliate or control her again. At work, she learned to navigate Victor's moods like a game. She anticipated his commands, avoided mistakes, and slowly started documenting everything. Irregularities, unethical decisions, the little things that could one day be used against him. Even as she obeyed outwardly, inwardly she was preparing. Every assignment became practice, every mistake she caught was a building block for a stronger self. Maria applied to night classes at a local business college. She worked on homework during lunch breaks, hid textbooks under files, and stayed awake long after her roommates or neighbors had gone to sleep. She was building herself quietly, secretly, with the ferocity of someone who had nothing to lose except her dignity, and that she would never lose again. Weeks passed, Maria's skills grew. She began to see opportunities she had never noticed before, loopholes, gaps, and weaknesses she could exploit. And one day, as Victor barked an unreasonable order, she realized something terrifying and liberating. She didn't need to obey forever. "I will rise," she whispered to herself, "and when I do, he will pay." Maria has endured months of suffering, but her fire is only beginning. Subscribe now to see how she starts building her empire. Maria walked out of Victor's office for the last time, her hands trembling but her heart racing with a strange mix of fear and liberation. The glass doors of the skyscraper reflected a woman no longer willing to be broken, though she had no idea how far the road ahead would stretch. Her wallet was nearly empty. She had no savings, no safety net, and her family depended on her. Yet she carried something far more valuable: determination. The first weeks were brutal. Odd jobs barely covered rent and groceries. Nights were spent in cheap apartments with peeling paint and drafty windows. Hunger gnawed at her, and exhaustion weighed on her like chains. Every day she felt the sting of humiliation, the memory of Victor's eyes following her, mocking her from a distance. Yet Maria refused to let despair win. She took a deep breath, whispered a promise to herself: "I will never be powerless again." Maria had applied to a scholarship program at a local business school months before, hiding her application under her bed. She received the acceptance letter while folding laundry in the dim light of her apartment. Tears blurred her vision. She was going to study, truly learn the tools she needed to escape the world Victor controlled. She balanced work and classes, often skipping meals to afford textbooks. Late nights were spent memorizing accounting formulas, corporate law, and management strategies. Every page she read was a weapon, every lecture a step toward her eventual revenge. Armed with newfound knowledge, Maria tried her first business venture. She started a small consulting service for local companies, helping them organize finances. Her first client was promising, but the business stumbled. Mistakes were made, trust was broken, and she faced her first real failure. Yet she didn't give up. Failure became a teacher rather than a punishment. Maria adjusted her strategy, built a network of reliable contacts, and learned to pitch herself with confidence. During her classes, Maria met mentors who believed in her intelligence and resilience. One professor noticed her determination and provided guidance on investments and legal loopholes. She also connected with other women who had suffered workplace exploitation. Together, they formed a quiet but powerful support network, sharing advice, encouragement, and ideas. These connections would become crucial in her rise, and they reminded Maria that she wasn't alone, even if Victor thought she was. Months passed. Maria shed the timid, fearful girl she had once been. Her posture became confident, her speech assertive. She learned to navigate boardrooms, pitch ideas to investors, and handle negotiations with precision. Her family noticed the change. Though they didn't know the full extent of her suffering, they could see the spark in her eyes, the fire of someone who would no longer bow to anyone. Eventually, Maria landed her first major client. The contract was modest but meaningful, a start. For the first time in years, she felt pride not born from survival, but from achievement. She celebrated quietly, reflecting on the journey. From fear and exploitation, she had clawed back her dignity. From poverty, she had built knowledge and resilience. From despair, she had sparked ambition that could never be extinguished. Late one night, reviewing her growing network and the contracts piling on her desk, Maria realized something thrilling. She had the tools to challenge anyone, even Victor. She could see paths he never imagined, plans he could not anticipate. He had underestimated her, and that mistake would cost him dearly one day. Maria smiled to herself, whispering, "I'm not the girl you broke. I'm the woman who will own everything you think is untouchable." As she looked out over the city skyline from her small apartment, she imagined her empire rising, her influence spreading, and Victor powerless before her. This was just the beginning. Maria's journey from despair to power has only just begun. Maria's consulting firm had started as a small, humble operation, but her vision was anything but small. She treated every client with respect, insight, and meticulous attention to detail. A sharp contrast to the exploitative environment she had left behind at Victor's company. Her reputation began to grow. Word-of-mouth referrals brought more clients, and soon Maria was managing multiple accounts. Every contract, every project became a stepping stone toward her ultimate goal, independence and power. Investors began noticing her work ethic and skill. Unlike many in the industry, Maria didn't rely on flashy marketing. Her results spoke for themselves. She attended conferences, networked with influential mentors, and studied corporate tactics with relentless focus. Each small success fueled her determination to rise even higher. Soon, she caught the attention of industry leaders who had once dismissed her. They were surprised by the confidence and intelligence of the woman they had overlooked. Maria smiled quietly. The underestimated girl was becoming unstoppable. Maria never forgot the women she had met during her studies, those who had suffered exploitation or abuse. She hired several into her firm, mentoring them and giving them opportunities they had never dreamed of. Her company's culture became legendary, fair, empowering, and efficient. She was building more than a business, she was building a legacy. As her company expanded, Maria began looking into investments and partnerships that would give her leverage in the industry. She studied Victor's company from the outside, noting weaknesses and vulnerabilities. She created strategies to enter markets where his influence was strong, slowly carving out a foothold that would challenge him. Every email, every meeting, every plan was a calculated step toward the day she could confront him, legally, financially, and publicly. The turning point came when Maria landed a multi-million-dollar contract with a high-profile client. The negotiations had been tough, the stakes high, but she had outmaneuvered competitors and demonstrated both skill and integrity. That night, she allowed herself a rare moment of celebration. Sitting alone in her office, she looked at the city lights below, a reminder of how far she had come. "I survived him," she whispered. "I am stronger than he ever imagined." Meanwhile, Victor's company was facing scandals and financial instability. Poor management, legal threats, and internal betrayals had weakened his empire. Desperate to maintain appearances, Victor reached out to firms that could help, unknowingly approaching Maria's growing company. He had no idea the girl he had once tormented was now a CEO with power and influence rivaling his own. Maria received the meeting request and froze for a moment. Victor's name flashed on her screen. Memories of abuse and humiliation surged, but were replaced quickly with a cold clarity. She smiled to herself. The tables are turning. She prepared meticulously for the meeting, not as a subordinate, but as a woman in control, ready to assert her power and demand respect. The day of the meeting arrived. Victor entered, confident as ever, completely unaware of how much Maria had changed. He believed she was still the timid, obedient girl he had broken. He was wrong. The empire she was building was about to collide with his, and she held all the cards. Maria's rise is unstoppable, but soon she will face the man who once destroyed her. The morning of the meeting, Maria walked into the sleek boardroom with a calm, steady gait. Her tailored suit fit perfectly, her hair sleek, and her eyes held the cold confidence of someone who had endured and survived. Victor Harrington was already there, pacing with the arrogance of a man who had never known defeat. He looked up as she entered and froze for a split second, unaccustomed to seeing her in such a commanding presence. "Maria," he said, trying to mask his surprise with a smirk, "I didn't expect to see you here as the CEO." Maria smiled faintly, a controlled, deliberate expression. "Good morning, Mr. Harrington," she replied smoothly. "I assume you called this meeting for business reasons, yes?" Victor blinked, momentarily thrown off by her composed tone. In the past, she would have trembled, flinched, and apologized. Not anymore. As the meeting progressed, Victor tried his old tactics: charm, intimidation, and subtle threats. He attempted to manipulate her with flattery and reminders of the past. Maria remained calm, anticipating every move. She presented her firm solutions clearly. She highlighted weaknesses in Victor's company without mentioning him personally. She negotiated terms that gave her leverage in future dealings. Victor realized quickly that he was no longer in control. Every tactic that had worked in the past now failed. Maria had transformed, confident, strategic, and unafraid. Finally, Maria decided it was time. With the boardroom's attention, she addressed Victor directly. "Do you remember how you treated me when I worked for you?" she asked, her voice steady but sharp. Victor flushed, caught off guard. "That's in the past." Maria held up a folder containing evidence, not just of personal abuse, but of unethical decisions, company loopholes, and violations Victor had ignored. "This is the past," she said. "And the present. You underestimated me, Mr. Harrington. I learned, I grew, and now I hold the power you thought was yours forever." The boardroom was silent. Victor could only stare as she laid out the consequences of his actions: legal exposure, financial vulnerabilities, and the irreparable damage to his reputation. He realized, for the first time, that the girl he had exploited, humiliated, and controlled was now the one controlling him. He tried to salvage the situation with charm, but it was too late. Maria had allies, legal support, and a powerful company backing her every move. The arrogance that had once defined Victor faltered. Fear replaced it, fear of the woman he had destroyed, now standing taller than he ever would. Maria concluded the meeting with poise. "I hope you understand," she said, "that I am no longer the person you could manipulate. This is not revenge for me, it's justice, and justice always finds its way." Victor sat in stunned silence. He had underestimated her, and it would cost him everything. As she walked out of the boardroom, Maria felt a weight lift from her shoulders. The fire she had carried inside her for years was finally meeting its target. One final step remained: ensuring Victor could never hurt anyone again. Maria has confronted the man who destroyed her, but the final act of revenge is yet to come. Maria returned to her office after the boardroom confrontation, her mind calm but focused. Victor's stunned expression still haunted her, but she knew the work was far from over. Power alone was not enough. She needed to ensure justice was served. Using the evidence she had gathered over the years, financial mismanagement, unethical deals, and his personal abuses, Maria contacted the authorities and the media. News outlets exploded with the revelations. Headlines screamed of corruption, exploitation, and the downfall of a once feared CEO. Victor Harrington, the man who had once ruled the office with an iron fist, was now facing lawsuits, criminal investigations, and public humiliation. Maria watched the coverage in her office, remembering the terrified girl she had been. She felt no joy in Victor's pain, only satisfaction that he could no longer harm anyone else. She whispered quietly, "He forced me once, but I built an empire he could never touch." Her phone buzzed. Messages from her employees, mentors, and even the women she had once mentored poured in. They celebrated her courage, resilience, and the justice she had achieved. Maria knew that her journey wasn't just about revenge. It was about creating change. She used her newfound influence to establish a foundation supporting women who had been exploited, harassed, or silenced in the workplace. Her company thrived, but now it also became a beacon of hope. Policies were implemented to protect employees, scholarships were offered, and mentorship programs were created to help ambitious women rise safely and confidently. Maria had turned her suffering into something meaningful, a legacy of empowerment. Her family, once struggling and reliant on her alone, now enjoyed stability and security. Her mother smiled without worry, her brothers flourished, and Maria herself stood taller than she had ever imagined. The girl who had walked trembling into Victor's office all those years ago was gone. In her place stood a woman of strength, intelligence, and dignity, someone who would never allow herself to be powerless again. Months later, Maria received a letter. Victor's company had filed for bankruptcy, and he was facing criminal charges. She glanced at it, letting out a deep breath, finally free of the shadow he had cast over her life. She walked to her office window, overlooking the city lights that had once seemed so intimidating. "I survived him, I thrived, and now I am unstoppable," she whispered. Her empire was not just built on wealth, but on resilience, justice, and the power to change lives. Maria had turned pain into power, fear into strategy, and suffering into triumph. She had shown that no matter how dark the past, strength, patience, and courage could rewrite the future. Maria's story is a testament to courage, resilience, and the power of standing up against injustice. If you were inspired by her journey, hit subscribe for more stories of triumph over adversity, and don't forget to like and share this video.